It is the dawning of an age where we need to repent your bigotry, repent your phobias, cast down ableism and cast down sexism. You know, the Church of Woke is just like any other church, except our God is intersectionality and our devil is intolerance.
So does political correctness, woke culture, cancel culture threaten comedy? It's something we've talked about for a long time, but let's talk to somebody that knows about it. No, not me. I'm Brian Lilly, political columnist with the Toronto Sun. I want to bring in Ryan Long. You have probably seen his YouTube videos. He is someone who has built an online following after, well, being told he wasn't really CBC material. Let's get into it with Ryan Long. Ryan, you're coming back to Toronto for a couple of shows. One of them sold out. The other one, still some tickets. We'll give out details in a minute, but let me ask you, you're in New York City now. How different is it doing comedy down there compared to being up in Canada and trying to please the people that want to make comedy boring?
I mean, that's still, it's not, to be honest, like my series at CBC did pretty well. So it wasn't like I got fired or anything weird like that. It was just, I think if you want to do anything on your own or, you know, kind of in comedy in general, Canada's bad. Like whether it's the mainstream or you're saying wild stuff, I don't think that Canada's a great place to, you know, build a business and build like a entertainment career, period. Right. But,
there's always more opportunity stateside.
Oh, it's not even close. Yeah, but especially if you're kind of like in the, you know, whatever, operating in the counterculture kind of realm, right? But I always find, I think that idea that the audiences are so different in different places, I find they're all the same. I mean, there is that element of people like kind of on the internet getting mad about comedy and, you know, bloggers and stuff like that.
Thou shalt not listen to the fiery bigotry contained within podcasting.
But in actual comedy clubs, like most people are pretty normal, I think. So I think that idea that you can't like be funny anymore, it's more just, I see it as more like the mainstream kind of like machine has a bit of trouble, you know, touching on anything controversial without it becoming like a big scandal. But in terms of like actual comedy clubs, I feel like wherever you go, it's kind of the same, other than a few differences. If you go to places that are like way more red versus, you know, liberal metropolitans, there's kind of like a bit of a different vibe, obviously, on what offends them.
Let me ask you about the idea of campuses, though. I was hearing Bill Maher just the other day, and, you know, obviously he's very much establishment, likes to think he's anti-establishment still, but Bill is very much an establishment guy.
Yeah, Bill Maher.
And he said he doesn't want to play college campuses because he's, you know, annoyed with people getting offended at everything. Is that a reality?
Why is Bill Maher playing college campuses? I mean, this is the thing. Those are like corporate gigs, right? And it's kind of like, you know, my friend Kurt Metzger, he has a good point where he said every job in entertainment got turned into a corporate gig. So there is this element of, I can understand where if you have like a normal job and you can't say anything that's like, you know, that you can feel those like clamps coming down on you. But the truth is, like, if you look at, like college campus, those jobs have always been, hey, here's like a ton of money and you can come do this, you know, corporate gig essentially. Now colleges have like their very specific thing that they want you to say. I'm sure that 50 years ago, if you did a gig on college campuses, it was like, don't talk about religion, don't talk about this, right? So yeah, the people that end up working at a college as a booker have like a very specific thing, and the college kids, you know, they don't want the loud college kids that have a problem with certain things. I can understand why, you know, they're not going to book like a subversive act.
We're actually doing a book burning later. I mean, we have Harry Potter, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, which is basically our Salvador Rushdie's The Satanic Verses.
There's always been some version of that. So I guess where it's like, if someone like Bill Maher is like, hey, I wouldn't play college campuses, I was like, dude, why would I want to play a college campus? That's so like not even on my radar of something that I'd want to do. We're like touring around doing our own shows, and it's, I don't know, we're playing like clubs and theaters, and I think it's awesome. But I mean, the college gig, I guess if it's like a big money gig, but like, I don't know, I'm not like in a big hurry to do stuff like that.
You mentioned the word subversive, long been used in comedy. Are you subversive?
Yeah, it depends who you ask, I guess, right? I think that's, I'd like to think that I'm making like fairly nuanced, reasonable points. I mean, a lot of the things I talk about is that I'm like, most normal people think this.
Pfizer's just different, you know what I mean? They're not like other companies. So they had to pay a couple dollars back in the day for fraudulent marketing. Yeah, it's called faking it till you make it. Obviously their haters are coming out of the woodworks now that they're on top. Yeah, my pronouns are Pfizer.
But there's kind of you know, a lot of stuff that you probably aren't supposed to say in certain circumstances or certain jobs or whatever. So maybe that is the role of the jester or the comedian, you know, traditionally, is you can kind of get away with saying stuff that people might be in trouble if they say, right?
There's something about the dynamics of the coronavirus mixed with my personal political beliefs that made it important to snitch on your friends for gathering last week and important to snitch on them for not supporting gatherings this week. Science is crazy.
I mean, you can say stuff about relationships or women that, you know, if you said to your wife, you might be in trouble, right? But in terms of like subversive, it just depends on who you're talking to, right? If you're talking to the same stuff that might be subversive with your grandmother might not be subversive with a bunch of your buddies at a bar. And that's one of the big problems with like taking any sort of like comedy out of context too. Like things that are said in a dark room to a bunch of drunk people about sex, you know, or whatever, is not really meant to be like read on at like a transcript in a newspaper.
It's not meant to go on the 6 o'clock local TV news.
Yeah,
That's why even on TV, the most corporate entity within our media culture, they have different content for different times.
Yeah, and you have different context for different gatherings too. Like even when they take a little clip of something from a podcast or whatever, you go, yeah, you missed the like 2 hours that led up to there. You know, the same reason why you develop an audience with rapport, the same reason you might be with your friends and it gets pretty nasty to each other. But if someone just walked in, everyone's like, whoa, why are you being mean? And you're like, no, you don't get it. It was a whole thing before. So I think a lot of it, anything taken out of context, when things are purposely taken out of context, which I think a lot of times they are, I mean, that's irresponsible media handling, that's for sure.
I don't know if you've watched the show, but you talking about having different audiences and different material. It reminded me of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and you know, she goes from telling jokes to her friends at parties and at girls' showers to standing up while she's drunk at a wedding and repeating all the same nasty things she said in front of the aunties and the priests that are there. It didn't go over too well, right? It's
hell no.
It's context, it's audience.
Yeah, so context is everything and like nuance is everything. And obviously when you're being clipped, or when you're, when you're being sound bites or being clipped, or when they just see one thing you do, it's, I think especially when people are very fastened on one political team or one side of what they consider to be a very important argument.
This is one of our many Bibles. Cast down the vile comedy of Andrew Dice Clay. And though other religions in the past have gained control of the printing press to stop the spread of misinformation, we've seized control of the social media platform.
They don't care what your nuanced perspective is. They just see you as the enemy. Kind of like if you were, if your whole thing was a sports team and someone else comes in, they're like, yo, your players aren't this and that. And you're like, hey, buddy, you're just ready to fight out of the gate. And I think that's how a lot of people kind of have been feeling over the last 4 years.
You do take on topics that a lot of people don't want to talk about or feel they can't. For example, your piece that you did with one of your regular collaborators on woke versus racist.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
So the woke versus racist thing, you hit on what I regularly think, because I listen to some of the woke activists, and by the way, they've informed me they don't like to be called woke anymore. That's behind the times, and I don't know what they want.
I don't say that much either, to be honest, these days.
But they, often what they're saying, you're like, well, wait a minute, that sounds racist.
We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx!
That sounds ridiculous. And so you're poking the bear. Has that ever come back to bite you? Have you had people, organize a campaign against you or trying to say, that Ryan Long, he's, too much, he's a raconteur, he's whatever, cancel him. Have you had that?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about
No,
that.
but
You can't just
no,
say
I don't like to I mean, okay. There's like obviously right now when people are getting mad at you, it's more um if someone's calling you, words that will get you fired from jobs and you're like public enemy and all the things that it's a little more subversive when before where they go, oh, this guy's, hates religion and just doesn't have the same sting, even though in the other context you might get fired for it, right? So whenever those campaigns like against me do exist, I think that I like to think that I'm trying to be funny most of the time, or that what I'm saying, I think I kind of like make a reasonable point.
And just like some of the other churches, we believe that blasphemous ideas that cause dissent to our cause should be removed. Remove problematic language from your vocabulary.
So I try not to go on interviews and then like talk about their thing that like, I don't want to be I try not to like build my career based on like the scandals that have happened. So
Fair enough.
I try not to, like feed energy to them. But yeah, obviously if you're saying wild stuff, like people are going to be upset about it. And especially when, so it's like, I guess if you're going to say stuff that is going to bother people, then that's going to be part of the game. But right now, obviously, yeah, the stakes are high because they're trying to get your channels deleted and get your jobs done. But I mean, that's one part about kind of like operating independently is you're not really, beholden to anyone. So you can kind of, try to be at least as honest as you think you can.
I don't get the sense that when you're saying what you say, that there's malice involved in it. And to me, that's a difference. If you're being malicious and going after somebody or a group, that's different than pointing out a truth that everyone can see or talking about a nuanced issue in a funny way. Do you come at this with malice, or am I misreading
No,
you?
I think you're right. I mean, that's like a big part of, I think, my like comedy philosophy, and whether or not, I mean, whenever you talk about comedy philosophy, it sounds so corny because it's like at the end of the day, we're just like, telling stupid jokes in bars and stuff. But I think like one of the big problems with, kind of mainstream comedy is it was so filled with like hate. And I think that for me, even if it's not anything to do with, hot button cultural things, even if I was just talking about like a friend that made me mad or something with like a girlfriend or anything like that, I always try to get over it mentally before I make the joke. It's just kind of like, if you're, imagine even just like in a relationship, if you're making fun of your girlfriend, but you're still like actually mad at her, like it's not funny because you're, obviously you're trying to make a point. Like say what you have to say. If you really want to say it, just say it because you're in this fight still, right? So I try to be able to like come to terms with, my perspective and removing myself from it before I try to make it funny. So then at that point, I'm not it's not cruel, in which case I think it's funnier. But I think that some people, they have the opposite perspective where they're like, no, I like to be like angry and in it. And that's kind of like my style. But for me, I don't think that I like to operate in that space.
Speaking with Ryan Long, comedian, coming back to Toronto for a couple of dates, December 16th, 17th. We'll give you details in just a moment. But Ryan, I don't think it's corny to talk about comedy philosophy or how you go about making us laugh. We're just happy that you make us laugh. But is there somebody that, inspired you? How'd you get into this? Were you just a class clown? Did you, I hear older comics say, I saw Richard Pryor once and that was it.
Yeah.
So what made you say, that's it?
Well, just to backtrack, the reason why I think it's like corny to talk about comedy philosophy is like, it's almost one of the problems with comedy is that it started to be looked at as this like high, kind of position in sort of the machinery of like culture and then it started to be like, well, if you're a comedian, you need to be saying the right things because you have a responsibility. And, part of that is because it started to become this serious thing. And that's obviously happened when there's money in it and people started thinking that comedians are the ones we need to listen to. I think that was one of the problems is like comedians taking themselves too seriously and thinking that they're the ones that are going to save the world when at most they might like, you know, be able to like ease the tension for someone. But a lot of times, even if they have some aggressive political point, it maybe makes someone feel better. But a lot of times it probably just invigorates your opponent. So I don't even really know if it ever does anything.
And all you can do at home right now is follow me and other bloggers on Twitter as our opinions constantly change, so you can figure out which causes make you a murderer and which ones make you a hero.
But in terms of like why I got into it, I was just like super into making videos when I was a kid. So I was like, I was huge into like Tom Green and like all that, those kind of guys. And I loved like making videos with my friends and doing all that stuff when I was young. And then I started playing in a band and making videos with the band. And then I was doing these kind of like DVDs of like messing people with on the street. And then I started doing stand up. And so I've been into that kind of, you know, bugging people for a long time. And then there was different versions of it. And then when I moved to New York, I kind of was like, all right, all the things that I've been kind of doing for 15 years, I was just like, all right, I'm going to do sketches, street interviews, and my stand up. And I was kind of releasing all that stuff on my channel, all the stuff that I was, you know, working on kind of in the darkness in Canada forever. And then, you know, whatever, it kind of did pretty good in America.
Yeah, and it's doing well. And let me say this, I stopped listening to a lot of political comedians during the Trump era because there seemed to only be one channel and one note that they could hit. And it wasn't even a funny one. It was just that they hated Donald Trump and they wanted to say it over and over again. I mean, like the late night talk show guys, you know, it stopped becoming a monologue where you tell 15 different jokes and became, let me rant to you about the president for the next 20 minutes. So I think I stopped. Don't think I've watched one of them, except like old Conan bits on YouTube since about 2017.
Yeah.
You don't seem to, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're pigeonholed into one side or the other.
Yeah, I don't think so. And it always switches. It's not like, you know, these things always change. So this idea that like in this specific moment in time, there's someone that's so right and someone that's so wrong, and like any of this. But on top of that, to go back to the comedy thing, even if like, I always think that the point is to sort of like add something to the conversation, right? So if your perspective is that you hate Trump, which is, you know, a valid perspective that people are allowed to have, that like he's the worst, and you look around and you go, every single person is saying this, you know, and if every opinion that you have happens to be completely in line with everything that corporations want you to think, everything that the media wants to think, every allowable opinion that you're supposed to have, you just happen to have all of those opinions, which I would probably say at first, if everything that you think is an allowable opinion, you're probably lying to some degree, because I don't think anyone agrees with, you know, the general consensus on every single thing. Mm-hmm. But even if you do, then you're pigeonholed into a position where you essentially just have to be like a political propagandist. So if anything, I wouldn't talk about those things.
Hello! We've sort of designed it to be a bit of an echo chamber. I mean, if our viewpoint can take us to the promised land, should we not try anything in our power to get there?
If I was like, hey, I have something to say about Donald Trump, and you go, oh, it's already been said 10,000 times, I think I would just move on from that topic. And a lot of times there are, you know, hot button issues that come up, and I go, you know what? I kind of agree with what most people think on this, so I'm just going to sit this one out. I think I only talk on the issue if I think I have an interesting thing to say about it, or something to add that hasn't been said 10,000 times, or at least comedically, it better be like so miles above what everyone else is doing. If my point's, you know, just been essentially a meme on the internet at this point.
Ryan, you come back for a couple of gigs, December 16th, 17th, Royal Theatre, College Street, Toronto. Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, so I'm pretty pumped because, you know, we've been touring around America, and Danny comes with me on all the shows, and we've been like selling out shows, which is super cool. But this is the first time I've been able to come back to Toronto because of the COVID and stuff. And we put the one show on sale, like the Royal Theatre, and we sold it out in like a day and a half. So then we were just recently added a second show, and there's some tickets left for that, but it's like pretty close to sold out on the 16th, also at the Royal Theatre. And we're doing it through this guy, Rob Mayhew and Tyler Morrison, do this festival called the Dark Comedy Festival. And that's it's me, Luis Gomez is coming through, and Mark Norman and Zach Amico. So there's a few people from America coming, and they're all doing their nights. And I think that Me and I think he also added other nights too. But yeah, so 16th is when there's some tickets left, and that's ryanlongcomedy.com. And I do youtube.com/ryanlongcomedy. I release a video every Monday, and my podcast is The Boys Cast with Ryan Long.
All right. Well, it's been fun watching you from afar. So hopefully next week get to watch you up close. Ryan Long, thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.